So whilst the official platform version of Android 16 is already out, that exciting big Material 3 expressive redesign, it is still in beta testing and will be coming out for Pixel phones a little later this year. But I've already got the beta running on my Pixel 9, and whilst I get it, the redesign seems super exciting on the surface, especially after years of Android looking pretty much the same. The truth of the matter is that there is still a heck of a lot that I think Google needs to address with Android in general, but also with the redesign before they release the stable version. So folks, here is everything wrong with Android 16, and buckle up because this one's a long one. All right, let's kick proceedings off with where we all start when first waking up our phone, the lock screen. And whilst Google's lock screen has come a long way in recent years, it still pales in comparison to the competition. Firstly, please give us a better lock screen editor. This whole separate UI thing is super clunky and makes customizing the lock screen feel really unintuitive. We should be able to do everything on the lock screen itself, like how it works on One UI and iOS, for example. Then please give us better clock options. The ones that we've got at the moment were kind of fun like 3 years ago when they were first introduced, but man, they're honestly not that attractive looking. These first two options are the only two that kind of look okay, but even they feel like they belong to the Material U design era, not this new Material Expressive era. So please introduce some new, classier clock options that better match this new design language. And what better way to reflect this new design language than by finally giving the clocks some sort of depth effect? I mean, Apple has had this feature for years now and it looks amazing. We've also seen the feature added to a bunch of other Android skins in recent times. So Google, why not add it to Pixel phones as well? And while we're at it, please let us manually resize the clock. And I don't mean the weight of the clock like this weird slider allows for here. And also don't mean just a toggle to switch between a large and a small clock. I mean a bounding box that lets us manually increase or decrease its size with granular control. Oh, and quick tip that I only just learned while making this video, while you're in this style mode, you can actually tap the clock to switch between the rounded font and a more traditional font, which I actually prefer the look of. And here's a fun request, why don't you let us actually remove the clock completely? Maybe there's some of us who would prefer an outrageously clean looking lock screen, or maybe it would allow us to add our own clock via an app like KLWP. And then finally for our lock screen, widgets, and not just screen-savory style widgets like we've seen teased in recent leaks. I mean proper, always visible on the lock screen widgets. That would unlock so much functionality for our lock screens, and I know a heck of a lot of people would truly love this feature, so please Google, make it happen. All right, let's go ahead and unlock the phone, and as I do that, that reminds me of something else that Google needs to address, this awfully plain-looking fingerprint unlock animation. I mean, it just cannot hold a candle to some of the really clean and fluid fingerprint sensor animations that we see on other Android OSs. So I'd love to see Google updating this to have something more fluid and fun rather than this white circle implementation that we've had since Android 12 launched. Now, before we get to the home screen launcher itself, and trust me, we are getting there, I actually want to first point your attention to this thing down here, the navigation bar. Why oh why does it still need to be there? Sure, show it for like a second or so if you like, but then please Google, make it disappear. We all know that we need to swipe up on this area down here to go home. We do not need a constant reminder on screen all the time. I mean, just look how iOS does it. It never shows on the home screen. It shows for like half a second when you open an app, and then it just fades away and our screen looks much cleaner as a result. Oh, and whilst Android 16 was supposed to be the update where we finally did away with that background element behind this navigation area, apps still have to be updated to support it, and so there's still quite a lot of apps where you end up with this awful looking black background. But if you got rid of this area completely and only showed a flash of the navigation bar when first launching an app, then this actually wouldn't be a problem. And as for circle to search, just make the touch area way down the bottom, like how it works when you disable the navigation bar on One UI. Okay, from there we have the home screen, and boy oh boy, where do we even begin? Actually, I'll tell you where we begin. We begin by letting us remove both this at a glance widget and this search bar widget from the home screen. It is honestly wild to me that Google forces users to have both of these elements on the home screen, and I've honestly been complaining about this for nearly 5 years at this point, and the fact that it hasn't been addressed yet is baffling. Google, I don't care if you want to bury the settings to hide these widgets deep in the developer settings, but please just give us the option. Then why not let us use third-party icon packs? I mean, pretty much every other Android skin has this feature. Why not Pixel phones? And while we're at it, why not let us have more grid sizing options? I mean, Samsung phones now even have this DIY option that lets users have no grid at all, and it's seriously amazing. And so can't you at least give us more grid size options than what we've currently got? Like, is a 7x7 grid size too much to ask for? Oh, and why not implement a better method of moving apps around? I mean, right now it's this janky 1x1 process, so why not try something like iOS's implementation? Oh, and you gotta let us turn off app labels on our home screen. We see them every day. We don't need a little text box telling us what they are. Even Apple lets you do this. Here's another issue. Why oh why is it 2025 and there's still not an option to double tap our home screen to lock the phone? I mean, pretty much every other Android OEM supports this feature and has done for years. Why not you, Google? And last but not least, whilst the animations are pretty good, they're certainly not what I describe as very fluid. They're just, I don't know, kind of flat. So why not add a bit of bounce to the animations similar to what you've done with the notifications in the new quick settings panel? I reckon this would give the home screen experience a really nice lift. Now, here's the thing. Whilst I would still like all of these home screen changes to come to fruition sooner rather than later, literally none of them would matter if Google would finally fix how third-party launches perform whilst using gestural navigation. And I've gone on and on about this ever since gestures first became a thing back when Android 9 was released, if you can believe, in that because Google decided to bake the animations related to gestural navigation into the default stock launcher instead of making them their own separate thing, using third-party launchers in combination with gestural navigation has become pretty janky as a result. Now, to be fair to Google, they have made some improvements over the years, so using third-party launchers these days is not completely unusable, but the fluidity is just absolutely no way near where it needs to be. Now, if Google were to fix their own launcher by adding in all of the features that I just listed in the previous section, then they wouldn't need to worry about fixing how third-party launchers perform. And in fact, whenever I'm using any other Android phone, I actually always prefer to use the stock launcher because as long as it lets me remove everything from the home screen, I can still create the home screen setup that I like whilst also getting the most fluid home screen animations. But if Google isn't willing to play ball with their own launcher, then they've at least got to restore maximum fluidity when using third-party launchers. Because yeah, using third-party launchers means we get to use third-party icon packs, we get way more grid sizing options, we can disable app labels, and we can even use the double tap to lock the screen gesture. So Google, your call. Fix third-party launchers or fix the Pixel launcher. All right, from there, let's move on to the quick settings panel. And out of every change with this new expressive redesign, this, I think, is the most noticeable element that's been changed. And whilst it's promising, it needs a lot of improving. Now, from what I understand, a future software update is actually going to be switching to a separated notification and quick settings panel, which honestly looks really bad in my opinion. So hopefully that change will be optional. And I'm just going to assume as such and work on the combined design to see what improvements can be made to it. Firstly, when we first swipe down here, we need our brightness slider at the bottom for quick access, and we need a shortcut to our settings down here. Also, this line on the brightness slider, it needs to go. It honestly looks really out of place and pretty woeful as far as I'm concerned. Actually, I think the brightness slider should have a much rounder corner radius to better fit with the new aesthetic. Oh, and we should be able to tap this brightness icon here to enable or disable adaptive brightness rather than having to hop into our display settings every single time. Then when we swipe all the way down, let's keep that brightness slider at the bottom for better one-handed use, and then let's deal with the mess that are these toggles. Firstly, I love that we finally have the option of editing the size of these toggles, but guys, the actual editing process needs to be severely improved. Like when we tap to edit, we get this vastly different looking interface that doesn't match the look of the actual quick settings panel, so it kind of makes it hard to figure out what we're doing. Also, we shouldn't have to tap to then resize, we should just be able to resize straight away. I also think that there should be a larger option for our toggles too that would give us more control via just the toggle, like this Bluetooth one here on Nothing OS that lets us swipe between connected Bluetooth devices, for example. Also, I have no clue why Google decided that having different radii for our enabled or disabled toggles was the move, because I don't think this works at all. Instead, just keep the one shape for every toggle, and honestly, I actually think that full-on circles are a better option here rather than just heavily rounded rectangles. Then, while we're still talking about the toggles, two of the toggles in particular are long overdue for improvement, the internet toggle and the flashlight toggle. So right now, I've actually got a dedicated Wi-Fi toggle thanks to a super simple app called Wi-Fi QS, and using this means I can simply tap the toggle on or off to disable or enable Wi-Fi. Google, this is how your internet toggle should work. But if you're dead set on having a full-on internet toggle that when tapping opens up this Wi-Fi list, then make it similar to the Bluetooth toggle where we can tap the Wi-Fi icon here to turn on or off Wi-Fi, and then tapping anywhere else on the toggle opens up the internet sheet. Then the flashlight toggle. And honestly, the fact that there's still no system-facing way to adjust the intensity of our phone's flashlight, that is baffling to me. And as far as I'm concerned, rather than implementing a separate interface like Samsung or Apple, I reckon you should just make it so that the expanded toggle itself is actually a slider, much like this mod I installed on my rooted Pixel 8 Pro a couple of years back. And then finally for our quick settings panel, the fonts. Again, much like the lock screen clocks, this new font on the quick settings panel, I think it needs improving. It's currently this very cartoonish, bubbly style font, but I reckon something like Product Sans would look much cleaner. Anyway, with all that in mind, here's my completed mock-up of what I think this new expanded quick settings panel should look like. Obviously, I haven't mocked up what an expanded toggle would look like, but I'm sure you can use your imagination. But on top of everything else I just mentioned, I also took the liberty to clean up those Wi-Fi and data icons because I really don't like the new ones. And here's the before and after of the collapsed quick settings panel. And I reckon these redesigns clean things up considerably whilst also keeping that expressive design language firmly in play. But let me know what you think. And so whilst we're talking about UI tweaks, let's just quickly round off a bunch more. Firstly, the volume panel. And let's start by addressing this collapsed variant here in which, much like the brightness slider, we need to do away with that awful line. This is a much cleaner design. Then Google, please get rid of this garishly huge and unnecessary expanded volume panel. You know which skin does this the best, I think? Nothing OS. Like, check this out. You tap once to activate the collapsed panel, then you tap here to get an expanded but still beautifully compact panel that I think looks fantastic. Then if you want even more control, you tap See More and you're taken to a full screen interface, and Google, this is exactly how it should work. Aside from that, much like in the quick settings panel, we need to fix the Wi-Fi and data icons in the status bar. They just do not match anything else and look kind of ridiculous. Then here's a fun request. Why not let us use custom fonts across the system UI? That could be a very handy option that would allow us to make our phones feel even more personal. And then the only other UI tweak that I'd love to see is some sort of close or clear all button that's accessible at all times within our recents panel, not just right at the end like in its current implementation. Maybe slightly decrease the size of these toggles and add a simple X button in the middle. I don't know, I'll leave the design up to you, but please make this a thing. Now from there, before we get to the final really big improvement that I think Google needs to make, there's actually 3 other pretty easy changes that I'd also like them to make, the first of which is in relation to the haptics. For some reason, with one of the recent updates, Google removed the ability for us to independently tweak the keyboard vibration intensity via the Google keyboard settings. You can see on my Nothing 3A Pro here that the setting is still there, but on Pixel phones, it's not. And if we tap the settings cog here, it just takes us to the vibration and haptics page within our settings app, and we can either turn them on or off, and that's it. This touch feedback slider doesn't affect their intensity either, so I have no clue why they removed this setting, and they should absolutely bring it back. Then speaking of this touch feedback slider, why have we only got 3 levels to switch between? There should be way more steps available to choose from here, so hopefully they can add that for the stable release. And then the final subtle change that I'd like Google to address, please stop setting your phones to 60 Hz out of the box. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it's been happening with both the A series and non-Pro series Pixel phones since the Pixel 7a, I believe, and it just doesn't make sense. Or at the very least, give us the option to set the display refresh rate when first setting up the phone instead, if you're that worried about users unknowingly sacrificing battery life. Okay, the final thing that Google desperately needs to address once and for all is the camera app. Now, I'm not referring to its design, although you could argue that it could do with some modernizing, but let's focus on what's important here, its performance. Now look, it has actually come a long way in recent years, but there's still a bit of shutter lag, so it's not the best at capturing fast-moving subjects. There's still some jitteriness if you start recording a video fairly quickly after opening up the app, and lens switching when shooting videos still pales in comparison to other OEMs. And then we've got the dreaded portrait mode. This used to be a staple feature for me back in the days of the Pixel 3 and Pixel 4, but in subsequent years, not only did portrait mode images start looking less and less realistic, with the cutouts being too harsh and the background blur fall off looking too fake, but even worse than that, the performance of the camera app when shooting portrait mode images, it is absolutely atrocious. So it'll let you take like 5 or 6 portrait mode shots, but then after a very short period, it'll start completely blocking you from taking any more while it finishes processing your captured images in the background. And trust me, when you're trying to capture photos of people, this is a proper nightmare, so it needs to be fixed. I mean, maybe you don't need to process them at all in the background until the camera app is completely closed. Like, that could be a very viable option, no? And what about the cinematic blur feature? It literally hasn't been updated once since Google first introduced it with the Pixel 7 series, and I mean, it's still stuck at 1080p for crying out loud. But beyond that, more than anything, Google desperately needs to somehow provide a once and for all fix for the quality of the cameras when using them in literally any other app that isn't the actual camera app itself. Like, for example, this is me recording a video using the stock Pixel camera app. And this is me now recording a video using the Instagram app. And finally, this is me recording a video using the TikTok app. And so, need I say any more? Google, you need to fix this. And so, there you have it. That is my huge rant about everything that's wrong with Android and the Material 3 expressive redesign in particular. And I'm honestly really hoping that Google watches this video and figures out as much as possible before this huge redesign rolls out officially later this year. If I missed anything, add it down in the comments below. But that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will catch you later.